What's going on, everyone? My name is Michael Lewis, aka Turbo Mike, and this is my review of my sim rig. Now, the first question some of you might be asking is, why did I get a sim rig in the first place? Well, the answer is pretty easy. As I've been getting older and older, and now that I am engaged to my gorgeous fiance, I wanted a way that I could immerse myself in motorsports without spending the massive amount of dollars to actually go to a track or participate in NASA wheel-to-wheel. Now, with that being said, I could have done something like go-karting, but even go-karting is a little bit more on the expensive side, whereas sim rig, you buy the hardware, you buy the software once, and then you're able to actually participate, every day. If I have a spare second of time after, doing some work and I want to jump on for a couple races, I can immerse myself relatively easy without having to, spend the money on a track day, the maintenance, tires, just the upkeep, in general for the car. So it's a really cool way that I can, go ahead and have fun, but be relatively conscientious of how much money I'll be spending on my hobby moving forward. Now, with that being said, I do believe I bring a somewhat unique perspective to sim racing and sim racing reviews. Why is that? Because I have been a part of racing for, HPDEs and racing for the past 10 years or so with my BMW, which most of you have seen. Now, there is some interesting and unique perspective on that, because most people in sim rig racing start out in sim rig, which I probably should have done, start out in simulation racing instead of just jumping into a car and going out and doing it. So what I bring is that the feel and the uniqueness of actually being in a car and then transferring that over to something that's completely simulated. So I actually don't have to go from, okay, here's the sim, I gotta get reacquainted to what an actual car does. It's the other way around. I know what the car is gonna do. What do I expect the sim to do? Is it gonna, is it gonna have that understeer feeling that you have when you start to slide and kind of push off the track? What happens when you have oversteer? How easy is it to correct? Tire stuff. There's a lot of different aspects that I really looked forward to experiencing in sim rig, and keep in mind I didn't spend $10,000 to $20,000 on a simulation rig, with motion and the highest quality parts. I just wanted to get started, obviously. But I think that unique perspective of coming from someone who has wheel-to-wheel experience into sim racing will be really, really cool, and hopefully will be entertaining for all you guys to watch. Alrighty, so what are some goals for sim racing? I think the number one goal is to actually have fun. That's the one thing I love about motorsports and going to HPDEs and doing wheel-to-wheel racing. I really want to win, and obviously that's the main goals to come first. But in general, I think the funness of the sport is really what gets my juices flowing. And so I would like to become competitive enough where I can keep up with, high-level racers in the sim world. Like I said, I'm not starting out with iRacing. We're going to be starting with a little GT Sport, which is kind of a bridge between the arcade and simulation style racing games. So hopefully I'd like to get, up there in the ranks and really put in some competitive races. And I really don't have like an overall goal, like I want to go to, the GT Invitational and win a national championship or world championship. Like, I don't need to do that. As long as I have fun, racing door to door with someone, having respect, and coming out with some cool wins and some cool content, then that's all gravy for me. So how did I decide on the gear that I got? Well, I knew Fanatec was kind of the middle ground in terms of simulation products. Logitech is kind of on the lower side, and I wanted something that, with my background in racing, I wanted something that could kind of bridge that gap between the real stuff and simulation. Now, I didn't want to spend $3,000 on a set of pedals, because I'm not there yet, and I, to be honest, don't think I ever will, because my fiance would kill me. But I think starting with some nice Fanatec gear, kind of middle of the line, started with a CSL Elite wheelbase. We didn't go to the Podium, which is direct drive. If you have any questions, you can look that up, but direct drive is just a one motor that's turning the wheel, and then with what I have, the CSL Elite, it's belt driven. So there's a little bit of a different feeling, and so I didn't want to break the bank, obviously, right off the bat, so I decided to go with the belt driven system for right now. The Sim chassis is provided by SimLabs. It's an aluminum chassis. I was deciding to go steel or aluminum, and I have a bunch of friends in the space that said, hey, get aluminum. It's way stiffer, it's lighter, and it's just overall better quality, and you can add attachments to it really easily. So I have the SimLabs chassis, I have all Fanatec gear, and then for my seat I have TrakRacer, which they also provide rig stuff like aluminum and steel chassis. But I heard so much good stuff about the SimLabs that I decided to go with them and just purchase the TrakRacer seat because it looked like the best for someone like myself who has a really tall torso and kind of a big bum. So that's kind of where I started, and the total pricing of everything, I did get some things used, so I did save some money there, but you're looking at about $3,000 for everything. So that's your gaming system, your chassis, your seat, all of your Fanatec gear, all the hardware, and then a television. So that's pretty much it. I could have gotten some other things like a handheld shifter, but most of the cars that I'm driving on these simulations are GT cars, which are almost all paddle shift now. So I didn't really see a need to get a stick shift at the moment. I probably will at some point, but for right now, I think I have a pretty good sturdy base to start with. So that's pretty much everything I want to kind of introduce. I don't want this introduction to drag on too long. Some other questions, I don't think I'll be upgrading anytime soon. I'm really happy with where I'm at right now. You know, maybe in the next couple of years I will, but like I said, I don't want to spend $3,000 on a set of pedals when I'm probably gonna have a baby soon. So, I'm not soon, don't quote me on that, fiance. But anyway, so yeah, let's get into this review. And I hope you guys enjoy it. I know a couple people have been asking for it, and obviously I'm not used to this. I just got a brand new camera and all this cool gear, so I'm figuring everything out. So thank you guys for sticking with me, and hopefully you find some entertainment, and let's get into the review. Before we get into the review, we're going to just take a second to look at how gorgeous of a rig this really is. Alrighty, let's dive right in. Here we have the 80/20 aluminum setup. Now those grooves are used to attach the entire rig together, and any other attachments like your pedal base, your TV, and your seat. Extremely versatile. You can really plug in whatever you want, wherever you want on the rig. Fantastic. Moving on, we have the pedal base, which is also extremely adjustable. The whole theme of this rig is adjustability. So there's different grooves, you know, if you want your pedals closer, farther away, different configurations on the top, so you can fit a, you know, Logitech or a Fanatec pedals on there. Again, with the 80/20 theme, we have the TV mount. Now I went with a TV mount instead of a standalone because I was very conscious about how much space I wanted to take up, and that was the best way not to take up a lot of space. As you can see here, it's relatively narrow other than the PS4 on the side, and doesn't really take up a lot of space. It's a 43-inch wide TV, so this rig is no wider than 40 inches, which is which is fantastic as we look at this gorgeous wheel rim, probably my favorite part of the whole rig. Now this is the TrakRacer seat. I don't have an exact model number, but it's the only one that they have. Fantastic because it comes with different cushions, so if you want a thicker cushion for a shorter person, you're able to insert that in there and get the proper driving height. It is made out of fiberglass. It actually feels exactly like my Sawbell race seat in my BMW, and is great because I am kind of a big person, but it fits me perfectly. Along with the adjustability of the cushions, I did add sliders, so anyone who is as of a different height than I am, it will make their experience a little bit more enjoyable. And it was super easy to install, as you can see there. Just universal sliders, lots of adjustability, fantastic. Here we have the PlayStation 4. I don't have a gaming computer for iRacing yet, so I will be using GT Sport for the next year or so. This is the Collective Minds adapter. When I bought my wheelbase, I accidentally bought the Xbox version, so I needed to buy this little adapter, so I was able to use that wheelbase with the PS4, and it works perfectly. Again, panning out here, we have the 2019 F1 wheel rim. Unfortunately, only the top buttons work on that wheel rim, and the bottom three for PlayStation. Those little twisty knobs in the middle and the sides, they don't work, but they do work with a PC, so you can program those, of course. Alrighty, now let's get into some actual racing footage. The first thing I want to mention is turn 1 in the Red Bull Ring right here. You kind of hop over the apex and need to accelerate on rumble strips. Now watch the steering wheel. You have a little bump, okay, come over and you can correct extremely quickly. That's one thing I noticed about this wheel compared to a controller. Let's watch again on turn 2. With a controller you only have so much movement to wiggle to actually correct the car, whereas here you have a lot of room. Now watch this again. Steering, just a little bit of a counter steer helps so much. Now, some things I wanted to mention about this steering wheel. When you get the steering wheel, it doesn't come out of the box with the proper setup. You need to dial in the steering wheel. There's a bunch of settings like force, so that's, force it takes to turn the wheel, force feedback, so that's, what kind of forces you get during understeer when you go over a rumble strip, bumps in the road. There's also other things like ABS feedback, which vibrates the steering wheel as you brake, which happens in real life. And then there are some other settings that I didn't really understand, like spring and dampener. And those settings, when I turned them up, it felt like it was a little bit rougher and there was a bunch of clicking. So once I turned those off, the steering wheel became fantastically smooth and right where I wanted it. Now, along with the force feedback, you see a lot of people trying to do these challenges for, like 20-pound force feedback, which it doesn't make sense to me because a lot of these new cars, especially mine, the steering really isn't that tough. Now, I upgraded my 335 steering rack to an M3 and it made it a little heavier, but in no way, shape, or form is that the same as an E36 with no power steering. There's a big difference. So I actually like the steering wheel to have about 70 to 80% force feedback on this setup, which actually isn't that much, but it gives me the most realistic representation of what I drove on the track. Now, a couple other things about this wheel that are, great compared to controllers. You can really feel where understeer is. Understeer in a real car is not, black and white. You kind of feel a gradual, loss of grip, whereas this, it's kind of on and off. When you start understeering and pushing the car, it goes from being a smooth turn to, kind of giving a rumble, and the car just keeps going the opposite direction. So it's not that realistic. I mean, they bet they can, they can do as best as they can with this, and maybe the higher, quality steering wheels are able to provide you with a better sense of understeer. But that's one thing that I'm kind of about. But, also oversteer, as I just showed you and said, it's super easy to correct, fantastic, way more enjoyable than, using a controller.
Now, moving on, the second half of the setup will be the pedals. Now, in my opinion, the pedals aren't as important as the wheelbase. The wheelbase is really what you feel. The pedals, unless you have a PC setup, the PlayStation really doesn't use the motors on the accelerator and the brake, so you really don't get like a lot of force feedback from those from the pedals themselves. But in terms of being able to modulate throttle, you know, kind of correct understeer, if you will, you know, you correct understeer by just kind of letting off the throttle. It does a fantastic job of doing that. Now, when I had my controller and, you know, you're controlling the accelerator and the brake with some triggers, there's not a lot of movement and not a lot of, finesse is involved. Now, with that being said, you know, my brake pedal is pretty stiff, but it is still easier to control and feel than, you know, an actual controller. Another thing is the left foot braking. I need to get used to left foot braking because in my car I heel toe, so I don't have a lot of opportunity for left foot braking unless I just want to, you know, load the front tires by a quick brake tap. So I'm getting used to doing the left foot brake and then accelerating and kind of inversely proportional movement, but it actually hasn't been that difficult, to be honest with you guys. So if you're worried about having using your left foot, it's really not that bad. And that will pretty much bring us to the end of the review. I apologize that my thoughts weren't as organized as I'd hoped them to be. This is my first week having the sim rig in here, and so I'm trying to collect all my thoughts and compare them to my previous experiences. But, you know, this is a great place to start. I'm super excited for the next months, and I'll probably have a check-in in the next month or so and kind of give you my thoughts on what I've done to tweak the wheelbase and, you know, tweak my driving style to match and really get all I can out of the wheelbase and the pedals. So thanks again, and then I will just bring myself back in for some closing thoughts, and you guys will be on your way. Thank you.
And that will do it for our review of the sim rig. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to shoot me a message or a DM or anything like that. I'm happy to help out. I do suggest it for anyone who's looking to get into racing but maybe doesn't have the funds to go into full-on, you know, HPDE NASA wheel-to-wheel racing. So yeah, it's a great way to get into sport. It's a lot of fun. Again, if you have any questions, please let me know, and enjoy the rest of your days. Thank you.